Hey, Peace World. Thanks for pressing play on another Pay Me No Mind sports and entertainment video. Definitely got to get into some bite down boxing, presented by PMNM. And, hit the subscribe button. If you like the way that any topics, subjects, or headlines, events are being broken down, discussed, reviewed, recapped, analyzed, and whatnot. Any engagement would be appreciated 3,000%. Hit the like button, uh, share the content, make a comment, etc., etc. Look, man, I thought last night was a great night of boxing on ESPN and ESPN Deportes. I noticed that, as you probably did, that Andre Ward was not on the call. Kind of missed his presence a little bit. His thoughts on some fights or input on some fights would have been, a plus, as it usually is. Quickly before I get into the fights, kind of a interesting development with Jamel Herring, the WBO junior lightweight champion, who tested positive for COVID-19 and is in the final stages of recovery, and his fight has been pushed back tentatively, I think, to July 2nd or the second, mid-July or something. So just to hear him discuss it, and if you have followed things, Jamel has been in camp at the B&B Academy or whatever it is, Bomac and Bud's gym. They've been in camp for several weeks. I want to say before things were really lifted, the restrictions and whatnot were really lifted. There's a couple kids from Cincinnati were down there. Javon Garnett, I believe is his name, out of Cincinnati. Boubacar Silla, I believe was down there in that camp, as well as Desmond Jarman, who was a part of one of the first cards that you could have streamed on Fight Night Live, I believe. So to see all of these guys hanging out and in the gym, for the last 4 to 5 weeks. And it's interesting because now I think what they mentioned was Bomac shut the gym down and they had it professionally cleaned, and then the rest of the guys had to get tested. And from what Jamel said, not many of those guys came back positive. So it's just interesting considering the contact tracing and some of these different cases that are popping up. With the NBA trying to come back, NFL expecting to, keep their schedule. It's just interesting because I feel like we're going to have to live with this thing besides just shutting everything down until, they get this vaccination and so on and so forth. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And you notice how the attitude towards COVID-19 has kind of changed from where Bob Arum was when this thing started. Understanding that, it's a medical situation that's not completely, there can be no guarantees right now. So, getting into the fights, I did a video yesterday talking about whether or not the kid from Milwaukee, Rolando Nano Vargas, whether or not he could steal the show or not. I'm not gonna lie. I mentioned that that Miguel Contreras was listed as the A side. He was also 10-0 with 6 knockouts, and the kid, you saw that the kid could fight. He had a completely his class based on. I think he had I think in the article that I wrote, I did a couple recaps out there at bitedownboxing.com. But I think, I put 41 rounds of experience versus, I said he had an advantage of 41 rounds. I actually think that was maybe 36, 37 rounds of experience over Rolando Vargas. Vargas had also never been out of the second round. He had never fought an opponent with more than 2 fights, I want to say. I think it was one guy, he was the dude's third fight. So it was huge experience advantage for Contreras, and you could see it. He was just a step ahead of Vargas all night. He had a great poker face. He didn't know how to lose, obviously. And he had a good chin, too. So, all of those things played in his favor. I felt like Vargas rocked him at least twice, but really briefly. And he didn't show it. His confidence and all of that type of stuff didn't waver. His demeanor in the ring, he didn't panic. And I just feel like one of the things that kind of worked against Vargas was, when he did catch him or hurt him, because he hit him with the 1-2 a couple of times. But, you're going to need more than that. But he didn't get that forearm. He couldn't use that forearm and his movement and kind of keep Contreras, who was a tad smaller, I thought, shorter. But once he rocked him, he didn't like move in quickly, get that forearm in there to keep him where he wanted him, and then get those next group of punches in on him. Everything he was able to do was single punches. And his jab Vargas' jab totally disappeared after about maybe like halfway through the first round. He never really went back to his jab. And I kind of seen his move before, as far as, jab to the body, a little bit of work, and then attack. And usually when he attacked and flurried, went into his combinations, he'd been getting those guys out of there. But Contreras was there all night. Good win from Contreras, scrappy kid. I believe he was trained, I'm not sure if he was a Garcia kid or not. But they mentioned, he had some sparring with Adam Lopez, who won a couple of weeks ago, a majority of the decision, and then he also got some sparring in with Joshua Greer Jr., who lost by a majority of the decision, I believe. So I'm not sure if Vargas, got some good sparring in prior to the fight. I don't know if a guy like Luis Feliciano was in the Milwaukee area. I know there's another kid that they just announced, the Top Rank just signed. I forget his name, but tough fight, man. The kid Vargas had the nose bloodied after the first round. Contreras' hands were busier. His cadence, his pacing was slightly better. The kid took the fight wanting to get signed to Top Rank, and he gave it his all. Came up a little short. Funny thing was, that would have been a hell of a showbox fight, and Vargas was actually attached to like the April 10th showbox fight that was supposed to go down in I want to say Nebraska, but with the Charles Conwell card that Showtime was working on. So this is a little interesting side note. I didn't watch the Christopher Diaz and Jason Sanchez all that much. I saw, but Diaz had control of it, won it wide on all three cards, and put in a good enough effort to go back and say that he liked to get into the title picture at super bantamweight, at 122 pounds, going down from featherweight. I think that'd be interesting if he can pull that off. But he looked pretty good. I mean, I saw him stabbing up Sanchez pretty well, and he gets the victory. So he said, he had a 5-year plan, and all of that was very interesting to hear, knowing that he took the loss to Shakur Stevenson, when we kind of realized, some folks realized that Shakur, that his ceiling was pretty high. So he was in the co-main event, pretty decent fight. And then we get into the main event with Joshua Franco from San Antonio, upset the USA debut of Andrew Moloney. I thought Moloney started out pretty good, man. I like the pop that I heard on his punches. He was a little bit straight up and straightforward in his attack repeatedly. And basically Franco just had more class. he was comfortable doing his thing. He was able to establish his fight. It took him a while to catch his to get his timing down. Like I said, I thought Moloney, he was ripping that left hook to the body, and he Franco just had a. I mean, he like I said, he was able to make the fight the way that he wanted it, to get the real estate in the location that he wanted to fight at. He did some crafty stuff from the mid range and inside, and Moloney not having the power to really, break down and slow down Franco. Franco was just consistent all night. And then once he did catch Moloney, Moloney's work rate faded. I think Bradley was mentioning that he was catching, that Franco was catching Moloney on his toes and bouncing and whatnot. He was just all wrong for Moloney. I saw where Moloney mentioned that it was not the best version of himself. I don't know if I really agree with that. But right now, the conditioning for a lot of these guys, him and his brother did get over here in the States in like mid to late May. No crowd. I got to salute these guys for fighting under these conditions, man. But Franco just had his number. He got the knockdown in the 11th round. Moloney's gloves touched the grounds. After that, it was kind of like a lunging. It was a left hand shot. It was like a lunging shot that drove his head back a couple steps back into the ropes. And then he came with the little flurry that, while Moloney was disoriented, his gloves touched the ground. Like I said, I thought Moloney fought a fairly decent fight, man. He was just in a guy that had all the answers for what he was trying to do. And when he slowed down, Franco just got the better of the exchanges. Head movement, his positioning, he wasn't as squared up. Because Moloney was catching him with the 1-2. He was landing his left hook up top, landing some solid shots. And then it was just like it was real slight adjustments that Franco made to avoid getting caught flush with those right hands that Moloney was landing early on. And once he made that adjustment, it was all downhill for Moloney. Franco wins it widely, or convincingly on all three cards and whatnot. And a guy goes from like 16-1-2, gets 17-1-2. This is a pretty damn entertaining fight. Moloney, I think, drops to what, like 21-1. So that's interesting to see how it affects the other brother, his twin brother, who fights Thursday or tomorrow night. It's interesting, these fighters come over from overseas and want to fight in the States, want to make it in the States, in the fight capitals of the USA. And, they take those risks and give up that home court advantage. And they aren't always successful. But I thought it was a very strong card. The heavyweight fight between Ogwin and Stewart, wasn't the greatest. We lost the Adorno fight. The kid had some dehydration and issues with making weight and whatnot, and fell off of the card. That fight had to be scrapped. So, pretty good night of boxing, man. I was pretty entertained, and like I said, good fight of young undefeated fighters risking their career. To be interesting to see where or how Rolando Vargas is able to pick up the pieces and resume things. I definitely don't think he should be discarded, for dropping a tough fight against a kid who was just more experienced than him. So let me get on off of here, man. Bite down boxing. Don't let them count you out. Pay me no mind. Sports and entertainment. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. Enjoy those fights tomorrow night.